This is the Bible Book Club. I'm Susan.
And I'm Heather.
And we're in the book of 2 Samuel.
Welcome to the club. Last episode in chapters 18, 19, and 20, David learns that Absalom died, and he's devastated. His grief runs deep, and his men feel guilty for their victory over Absalom and the rebellion. Joab chastises David, though, and redirects his attention to serving God and Israel. David began his return home to Jerusalem and met many of the same people he had met during his exodus. On the way back, the 10 tribes of Israel get jealous of David's tribe, Judah, because their proximity to the king. This creates another rebellion led by Sheba the Benjaminite. The episode ended with a short update on the 10 concubines who were abused by Absalom, who were consigned to widowhood.
It was packed, and this episode is packed too because we have a lot of stories. So we pick up in this episode in the middle of the new rebellion led by Sheba the Benjaminite. Now, David has a new commander, Amasa, remember, who is the former commander of Absalom and actually tried to kill David, which is kind of weird that David made him his new commander, but he did. When David appointed Amasa as his commander back in chapter 19, we were never given any insight as to how Joab felt about being replaced by a traitor. Was Joab totally fired or just demoted and ordered to report to Amasa, which would have been really hard for him? How did Joab react? Did he walk off in his usual temper and quit? And what was David thinking? Was he confident in this decision, or had he decided rashly to replace Joab with Amasa, a traitor? We don't know. Now, yes, David had some good reasons for what he did, because yes, Joab had disobeyed David and killed both Abner and Absalom. He killed Abner out of jealousy, definitely wrong. But should David have trusted Abner? Because again, remember, Abner was on the other team. I don't know why David chooses the leader from the other team to lead his team.
There's a lot of questionable decisions that David's been making these days.
Exactly. Now, regarding Absalom, perhaps Joab had good reasons for killing him too. First, according to the law, Absalom should have been killed for rebellion. Whether he was David's son or not, he rebelled. Second, he had betrayed Joab. Remember, Joab was the one who talked David into acknowledging Absalom and bringing him back into the community. So Joab had a personal reason for vengeance here. He's like, I brought you back in the community and you turn on us. So he was mad. Third, Joab knew that had Absalom lived, David would have gone soft on him. It's David's way. And Absalom probably would have planned another rebellion. He just would have risen up and done the exact same thing again. So did Joab do the right thing or the wrong thing? I don't know. Now back to David's decision to replace Joab with the traitor. Despite the wrong that Joab had done by killing these two men, he had also done a lot of really good things. As leader of the army, Joab had an outstanding record, and his loyalty to David and Israel was admirable. I mean, always committed to Israel and David. Now, we don't know how Joab felt about this demotion, and we can't say without more detail whether it was fair of David to do this. Whatever the case, Joab is not the kind of leader who sits quietly in the background. His commitment to David and Israel is too strong. And in this episode, Joab will find a way to take center stage again. All right. Scene 1. Amasa is stabbed in the stomach.
Continuing in chapter 20, verse 4. Then the king said to Amasa, "Summon the men of Judah to come to me within 3 days and be here yourself." But when Amasa went to summon Judah, he took longer than the time the king had set for him.
So David, let's set the scene here. David's back in Jerusalem and preparing to defend himself against Sheba. Sheba had rallied all the other tribes of Israel against Judah, or at least he was attempting to. David orders Amasa to pull the army together and report back in 3 days. Now, the 3-day time limit was important. Judah had a more cohesive army than the 10 quarrelsome tribes of Israel that Sheba's trying to rally. So if Judah could assemble and attack quickly, they could stop the rebellion before Sheba had time to organize the 10 tribes. But Amasa takes too long, probably because Amasa is incompetent. Remember, Joab defeated Amasa, and now Amasa is either replaced Joab or over Joab. On top of that, the men of Judah in David's army are loyal to their old leader Joab. Remember, Joab's a great commander. And so they're probably resistant to reporting to Amasa, who's a traitor, so that no wonder it's taking him longer than 3 days. Or possibly it could be that Amasa was still being disloyal to David and was purposefully being slow. Who knows? We do not know.
Verse 6, David said to Abishai, "Now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom did. Take your master's men and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities and escape from us." So Joab's men and the Kerethites and Palathites and all the mighty warriors went out under the command of Abishai. They marched out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri.
David is getting antsy and can't wait. And wanting to press his advantage, he turns to Abishai to get things going. Now remember, Abishai is Joab's brother. And David commands Abishai to command Joab's men, the Kerethites and Palathites, who were all Philistine men that were loyal to David. David may have realized his mistake. Amasa is not good enough, and what he needs is Joab. Joab's brother, Abishai, and Joab's men are the next best thing to Joab and will have to do. But why didn't David just reinstate Joab? Again, we don't know. Where was Joab? Well, he must have been amongst the men because...
Verse 8, while they were at the great rock in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Joab was wearing his military tunic, and strapped over it at his waist was a belt with a dagger in its sheath. As he stepped forward, it dropped out of its sheath. Joab said to Amasa, "How are you, my brother?" Then Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. Amasa was not on his guard against the dagger in Joab's hand, and Joab plunged it into his belly, and his intestines spilled out on the ground. Without being stabbed again, Amasa died.
Abishai and Joab's men arrive at Gibeon, which is northwest of Jerusalem. Amasa met them probably on his way to Jerusalem to report into David. Late, but better late than never. Amasa probably would have been very surprised to see them at Gibeon and then mad because he's supposed to be commander. What is Abishai doing here with all of David's special men, the Pelethites and the Kerethites? Then, out of nowhere, Joab appears on the scene like he was with Abishai's army because he's all suited up. The two are brothers, remember, and they have always fought together. Did David know Joab went with them? We don't know. Joab is not taken unawares by Amasa's appearance. And as in the case of Abner and Absalom, Joab has a plan. The man is going to do what the man wants to do, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. He has been waiting for this. A traitor is a traitor, and traitors must die. And Joab has been planning this for days. Amasa dies like Abner. Joab tricks him and stabs him in the stomach. In Amasa's case, Joab pretends to drop his sword and he picks it up in his left hand. Now remember, way back in Judges, we know that there was this one tribe of Benjaminites who fought with their left hand. Everybody back then apparently was forced to fight with their right hand. Being left-handed was wrong. So we know this from past fighting exercises in Judges. So because he picks it up with his left hand, this would have put Amasa at ease because it's the wrong hand for fighting. So Joab is approaching him friendly-like. Joab pretends that he's going to kiss Amasa by grabbing his beard, which was a customary but weird greeting to me. You grabbed the person's beard and pulled him over and gave him a kiss, I guess. I don't know. And Joab, then grabbing the beard with his right hand, uses his left hand and strikes Amasa and kills him in the stomach. It is impossible to like Joab. He is violently disobedient. But it is also impossible to hate Joab because he is fiercely loyal and a brilliant warrior. The problem with Joab is that he often makes the right move the wrong way.
Continuing in 2 Samuel 20, verse 10, Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. One of Joab's men stood beside Amasa and said, Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the middle of the road, and the man saw that all the troops came to halt there. When he realized that everyone who had come up to Amasa stopped, he dragged him from the road into a field and threw a garment over him. After Amasa had been removed from the road, everyone went on with Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri.
So remember, they didn't have texting back then. So if a leader died, you couldn't text everyone and go, hey, we're following so-and-so now. So it's almost like they plant this guy by the body on the road and go, you're following Joab now. Keep going. All for Joab. Keep going.
But it was too distracting.
Exactly. They were rubbernecking. And so it's like, this isn't working. It's slowing us down. Pull him over and cover him up. So Joab and Abishai leave Amasa in the dust. One of Joab's men stands over Amasa and informs everyone that if they're loyal to David, they will follow Joab, implying that Amasa was not loyal. And as if Amasa never existed, the army is back where it started with Joab as commander. Abishai just steps aside. I guess maybe Joab was the older brother. I don't know. But the point is, this happens whether David likes it or not. And I'm pretty sure he didn't like it. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Sheba has sought refuge in the city of Abel Beth Makkah. Scene 2, Sheba loses his head.
Verse 14, Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel Beth Makkah and through the entire region of the Bichrites, who gathered together and followed him. All the troops with Joab came and besieged Sheba in Abel Beth Makkah. They built a siege ramp to the city, and it stood against the outer fortifications.
Sheba's on the run. He has been trying to gather forces, but it sounds as if only the Bichrites followed him. No one is sure, in the commentaries I read, who the Bichrites were. But perhaps since Sheba is son of Bichri, they are his family members, so only his family is following him. Joab, on the other hand, has all the troops, it says, implying many following him. They besiege Sheba, who barricaded himself in the city of Abel.
Continuing in verse 15, while they were battering the wall to bring it down, a wise woman called from the city, Listen, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him. He went toward her and she asked, Are you Joab? I am, he answered. She said, Listen to what your servant has to say. I'm listening, he said. She continued, Long ago, they used to say, Get your answer at Abel, and that settled it. We are the peaceful and faithful in Israel. You are trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance? Far be it from me, Joab replied. Far be it from me to swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri, from the hill country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. Hand over this one man, and I'll withdraw from the city. The woman said to Joab, His head will be thrown to you from the wall. Then the woman went to all the people with her wise advice, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it to Joab. So he sounded the trumpet, and his men dispersed from the city, each returning to his home. And Joab went back to the king in Jerusalem.
An unnamed woman saves the day. She reminds me of Abigail.
The women are always the smart
I know,
ones.
right? She saves her people with wise words and swift actions. She quickly calculates the outcome of the battle. She knows that Joab would win this fight, and she and her people would die with Sheba. With bold decisiveness, she demands to speak to Joab. Like Abigail, she points out the sin potential of his plan to destruction. Abel is a city devoted to Israel, and they are innocent. They are peacemakers. To attack and destroy them would be a sin. Joab, like David did with Abigail, acknowledges the wisdom of this. He doesn't want to kill innocent people. It's Sheba he wants. The woman delivers. And that is the end of Sheba. Scene 3. Joab gets his job back.
Verse 23, Joab was over Israel's entire army. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Palathites. Adoniram was in charge of forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Sheba was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. And Ira, the Jairite, was David's priest.
Having disposed of Amasa and successfully squelched Sheba's rebellion, Joab is now back in charge of the army. What other choice did David have? Joab was a powerful and popular man, and David was growing weary and old. Even when David was younger, back in 2 Samuel 3:39, when Joab killed Abner, David said this, "These sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me." Now remember, the sons of Zeruiah are Joab and Abishai. And it's still true now. Whether they are saving David's life, which they have done, or going around David to do what they think is right, which Joab just did, it appears that Joab and Abishai are really the ones in control at times. David doesn't like it, but he seems powerless to prevent it. Perhaps that is why he does appoint Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the Kerethites and the Pelethites. These are the mighty Philistine warriors loyal to David and were specifically his bodyguards. So he may have said, Joab may have come in and said, "Oh, fine, you're the commander again. But you know what? You're not in charge of my people. My people are going to be under Benaiah," or whatever his name is. David probably just really does not trust Joab to be close to him anymore, but he can't control him. All right. Stay with me here. The entire narrative of chapters 11 through 20 ends here with this list of David's officials. Now, just to recap, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel are really one big story. 1 Samuel tells the story of the rise and fall of Saul. 2 Samuel tells the story of the rise and fall of David. Now, within 2 Samuel, chapters 1 through 10 describe the rise of David as king. Chapter 11 begins with David's fall and proceeds to describe the fallout of his sin with Bathsheba. So we're in the fallout side. It's a tragic fallout that evokes personal and national consequences. First David's sin, then his son's sin, Absalom, just covered that, within the family, and then the sins of the family spread to the nation. And we're going to get to that in 1 and 2 Kings. The final 4 chapters are the epilogue to 1 and 2 Samuel, because remember, they're all one book. So this is the big epilogue at the end. The stories in these last chapters seem random, but the author's a genius and he has a plan. He's once again going to compare Saul to David because we must answer the overarching question in 1 and 2 Samuel. And that question is, can anyone be a good king for Israel? And the answer will be a prophetic yes. Now, the author accomplishes this, the answering of this question, by writing the final 4 chapters with a chiastic pattern. Now, chiasm, we've talked about before, is a literary structure in which themes mirror each other in an inverted pattern. It's used a ton in the Old Testament, and it's fascinating. They were way better authors than writers than we are. Now, the focus of this chiasm, or any chiasm, is the center. It kind of builds to the center point, and then it builds down, and the two sides of the focus mirror each other. So in this case, in these last 4 chapters, we're going to cover this, if you could track with me. And I know you guys are listening to me, so you try to picture this. Saul causes a famine. Then the next step is David's mighty warriors. Then the central 2 points that we're going to cover are David's final song and David's final words. Then we move back again to David's mighty warriors, and we end with David causes a plague. So the mirror of Saul causing a famine is David causing a plague. And then inside that, you have the mighty warriors twice. And then in the very middle, you have David's final song and David's final words. And the focus of the 4 final chapters is David's final song and final words right in the middle of the chiasm. You tracking with me? Okay. So I'm going to call this Epilogue Part 1, Saul Causes a Famine, which will be compared at the end of the epilogue to David Causes a Plague.
Chapter 21. During the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years. So David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, "It is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death." The king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not a part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them, but Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, had tried to annihilate them. David asked the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make atonement so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance?" The Gibeonites answered him, "We have no right to demand silver or gold from Saul or his family, nor do we have the right to put anyone in Israel to death." "What do you want me to do for you?" David asked. They answered the king, "As for the man who destroyed us and plotted against us so that we have been decimated and have no place anywhere in Israel, let 7 of his male descendants be given to us to be killed and their bodies exposed before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the Lord's chosen one." So the king said, "I will give them to you." The king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. But the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth, the 2 sons of Aiah's daughter Rizpah, whom she had borne to Saul, together with the 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab, whom she had borne to Adriel, son of Berzali, the Malathite. He handed them over to the Gibeonites, who killed them and exposed their bodies on a hill before the Lord. All 7 of them fell together. They were put to death during the first days of the harvest, just as the barley harvest was beginning.
We don't know much about when in David's reign this famine took place because this epilogue is not chronological. It was after David was reunited with Mephibosheth for sure. Perhaps after Absalom's rebellion, because when David was fleeing Jerusalem in chapter 16, Shimei accused David of shedding blood in Saul's household. So Shimei may have been referring to this restitution to the Gibeonites. Now, famines were not uncommon in this region and always due to the deficiency of winter rains. This famine was severe because it was 3 years in a row. So David turns to the Lord to find out if there is a cause for the famine. And he learns that the famine is the result of Saul's betrayal. Saul killed the Gibeonites, not to be confused with the Gideonites, who were Israelites from the judge Gideon. The author explains that the Gibeonites were not Israelites, but Canaanites who were to be spared harem or annihilation when Joshua entered the promised land. Remember, in the book of Joshua, season 6, episode 6, the Gibeonites dressed in ratty clothes and brought moldy bread. Remember that?
They kind of tricked them.
Yes. They pretended to be from far away and therefore not from the land of Canaan. And so they asked Joshua to make a peace treaty with them because Israel was so powerful and they didn't want to die. And Joshua was tricked into the treaty, but the treaty stood regardless because he had to stick with it. Apparently, Saul broke the treaty. David approaches the Gibeonites to ask what he can do to make up for the offense, and the Gibeonites ask for 7 of Saul's relatives to be killed. David agrees because that was the law. The blood of the offender should atone for the blood of the victim. David spares Mephibosheth because of his promise to his friend Jonathan, who was Mephibosheth's father, and instead he executes 2 sons of Rizpah, a concubine of Saul, and 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab.
Continuing in verse 10. Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself on a rock. From the beginning of the harvest till the rain poured down from the heavens on the bodies, she did not let the birds touch them by day or the wild animals by night. When David was told what Aiah's daughter Rizpah, Saul's concubine, had done, he went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Jabesh Gilead. They had stolen their bodies from the public square at Beth-shan, where the Philistines had hung them after they struck Saul down on Gilboa. David brought the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from there, and the bones of those who had been killed and exposed were gathered up. They buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the tomb of Saul's father Kish at Zelah in Benjamin, and did everything the king commanded. After that, God answered prayer in behalf of the land.
The bodies were left exposed until God ended the famine with rain. Now, this was the most shameful type of burial possible for an Israelite, to just be left out there exposed. And Rizpah, a super, again, noble woman, the mother of two of them, is devastated. She makes a tent for herself to shield her from the heat of day and cold of night, and she protects the bodies from scavengers until God sent the rain, which could have been up to 6 months.
That's
I read.
really gross.
I know, because the beginning of the harvest was in April, and the rains did not usually come till October. Now, for her sake, I hope that God sent the rain right away. Well, David hears about her noble act of honoring the bodies of these dead men, and he's moved by her story of devotion and self-sacrifice. And he determines to honorably bury these men together with the bones of Saul and Jonathan, which were buried somewhere, where they were killed. David here again shows us that heart of his, and does what Rizpah cannot do. He orders the gathering of what was left of the remains of the house of Saul and provides a family tomb. God was pleased, and Israel is delivered from the famine. So that's epilogue 1. Epilogue part 2. David's mighty warriors and their mighty feats. Each of these 4 mighty feats describe a victory over the Philistines and the death of one of Raphah's descendants. Now, the long-standing emphasis on a victory over the Philistines is purposeful here. Again, we're in the epilogue. We're wrapping things up. And it fulfills a prophecy that was made by Samuel. When Samuel was to appoint a king over Israel, God told him in 1 Samuel 9:16 that
he will deliver them from the hand of the Philistines.
So Saul, the first king, failed to do that. He failed to deliver the Israelites from the hand of the Philistines. These verses here that we're about to read document that David succeeded. Again, we're comparing Saul to David. Saul did it wrong. David did it right. Now, Raphah was infamous because his descendants were giants. We know this because of the weight of their spears. They were probably related to the Anakites, a giant people who Joshua destroyed in Joshua chapter 15, verse 21.
At the time, Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. No Anakites were left in Israelite territory. Only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did any survive.
The only Anakites left were those in the Philistine territory of Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Sound familiar? Should, because these are 3 of the 5 ruling Philistine cities. David's mighty warriors went after them. First, there was Ishbi-Benob.
Verse 15. Once again, there was a battle between the Philistines and Israel. David went down with his men to fight against the Philistines, and he became exhausted. And Ishbi-Benob, one of the descendants of Raphah, whose bronze spearhead weighed 300 shekels and who was armed with a new sword, said he would kill David. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to David's rescue. He struck the Philistine down and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, saying, "Never again will you go out with us to battle, so that the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished."
There is always a Philistine in David's stories, starting with Goliath when David was a boy to years later now when he is older. David is growing tired in battle, and his nephew Abishai rescues him from Ishbi-Benob, a descendant of Raphah. And David's men decide in this battle that he's a liability in battle and needs to retire because, of course, everyone wants to kill the king. And the king is just not what he used to be. Okay, the second descendant of Raphah was Saph.
Verse 18. In the course of time, there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob. At that time, Sibbecai, the Hushathite, killed Saph, one of the descendants of Raphah.
So the first mighty man was Abishai, and the second one is Sibbecai. The third descendant of Raphah, who's defeated, is a brother of Goliath.
Verse 19, in another battle with the Philistines at Gob, Elhanan, son of Jair, the Bethlehemite, killed the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, who had a spear with a shaft like a weaver's rod.
And the fourth huge giant with 24 digits.
Verse 20, in still another battle, which took place at Gath, there was a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He also was descended from Rapha. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of Shimei, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were descendants of Rapha in Gath, and they fell at the hands of David and his men.
The full circle story is that David's first battle was with a Philistine, Goliath, and now David's mighty men finish off the family by killing Goliath's fierce relatives. David, compared to Saul, gets the job done. In the next episode, we'll discuss the heart of this chiasm with David's final song and final words.
What's a club without friends? If you're enjoying the Bible Book Club, why don't you share it? And then you can say, Welcome to the club. New episodes drop every Monday, and
Get all episodes now on Amazon Music.
as always, head over to susanme.com/Bible Book Club for show notes from today's episode. Bible Book Club is hosted by Susan Merrill and Heather Rubio, edited by Buck Buchanan, produced by Haley Mawat.